Hello and welcome to Life Story 999. Today, we bring you an inspiring tale about a homeless man named Sam who unexpectedly finds himself a hero when he steps in to save a young boy from a group of bullies. What starts as a brave act of kindness turns into a shocking twist as Sam learns about the boy's father. This story is a heartwarming reminder of courage, humanity, and unexpected connections. Please like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe for more amazing stories. In a small urban park that provided an escape from the city's hustle and bustle, Sam, a homeless man, often spent his afternoons seeking solace. The tall trees offered shade, and the park provided a sense of calm that was difficult to find elsewhere. For Sam, this place was a small haven where he could close his eyes and pretend that, just for a while, the harshness of his life didn't exist. One afternoon, as Sam sat under the shade of an old oak tree, he heard something that immediately snapped him out of his momentary peace. A sudden, sharp cry. Opening his eyes, Sam looked toward the playground area and saw a young boy, probably around 8 years old, surrounded by a group of older kids. The mocking laughter of the group echoed through the otherwise tranquil park, and Sam could see the young boy's fearful face as he held onto his backpack as though it were his only lifeline. "Please stop," the boy said, his voice trembling and barely audible over the teasing and jeering of the others. Sam's heart clenched as he watched. The boy's fear, his helplessness. It struck a chord deep within Sam. He knew that feeling all too well. It was the same helplessness he had faced countless times in his own life. Without a second thought, Sam pushed himself up off the ground, brushing the dust from his worn clothes as he made his way toward the group. His steps were deliberate, each one filled with a determination he hadn't felt in a long time. "Hey!" Sam shouted, his voice loud enough to carry across the playground. The group of boys continued their taunting, too caught up in their own cruel fun to notice him at first. Sam called out again, louder this time, until finally, the leader of the group, a tall, lanky kid named Mike, turned around, annoyance flashing across his face. "What do you want, old man?" Mike sneered, trying to cover his surprise with bravado. His friends snickered behind him, their laughter less confident than before. "Leave him alone," Sam said firmly, his eyes locking on Mike. There was a calm but unyielding edge in Sam's voice, one that made the boys hesitate, a moment of uncertainty passing among them. Sam didn't flinch, didn't step back. He simply stood his ground, his presence commanding despite his worn appearance. For a few seconds, silence fell over the group. Then Mike gave a dismissive shrug, his earlier bravado quickly fading. "Come on, guys. This kid isn't worth it," he muttered, shoving his hands into his pockets and turning away. The others followed, their faces a mix of irritation and reluctant acceptance. Slowly, they drifted away from the young boy, leaving him alone. As the bullies disappeared from sight, Sam approached the boy, who was still sitting on the ground, his small body trembling. Sam knelt beside him, his voice softening as he spoke. "Hey, you okay?" he asked, offering the boy a kind smile. The boy looked up, tears welling in his wide eyes. He nodded, though his face betrayed his lingering fear. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice shaky. I didn't know what to do." "You don't need to thank me," Sam said gently, reaching out to brush some dirt off the boy's shoulder. "Those guys? They're just bullies. They act tough, but really, they're not." He gave the boy an encouraging smile, hoping to ease some of the fear that still clung to him. The boy sniffled, wiping his tears with the back of his hand. "I'm Oliver," he finally said, his voice still small. "Nice to meet you, Oliver." "I'm Sam," he replied. He glanced around the park, then back at Oliver. "Where are your parents? You shouldn't be out here all by yourself." "My dad's come to pick me up," Oliver replied, looking around nervously, as if half expecting the bullies to come back. Sam nodded, noticing the boy's clean, well-made clothes and the expensive-looking backpack. It was clear that Oliver came from a very different world than Sam's, a world of comfort and security. But right now, those differences didn't matter. How about I wait here with you until he gets here? Sam suggested, giving Oliver a reassuring smile. The boy's face brightened just a little, and he nodded eagerly. They moved to a nearby bench, and Sam sat down next to Oliver. The adrenaline that had pushed Sam forward earlier was slowly fading, leaving behind a dull ache in his body. But as he watched Oliver relax slightly beside him, Sam felt something else, a sense of purpose that he hadn't felt in a long time. The minutes ticked by in comfortable silence. Oliver stayed close to Sam, clearly comforted by his presence. Eventually, a sleek black car pulled up at the edge of the park, and Oliver's face lit up. "That's my dad," he exclaimed, jumping up from the bench and waving. Sam stood as well, watching as a man in a crisp suit stepped out of the car. The man's expression was stern, but it softened immediately when he saw Oliver. "Oliver, are you all right?" the man asked as he hurried over, pulling his son into a tight hug. "I'm okay, Dad," Oliver replied, pointing back at Sam. "This is Sam. He helped me when those kids were being mean." The man, whose name was Henry, looked up at Sam, his eyes narrowing slightly as he took in the sight of the homeless man standing protectively beside his son. "Thank you," Henry said, his tone polite but guarded. "Thank you for helping my boy." "I'm just glad he's okay," Sam replied, nodding slightly. He could feel Henry's eyes on him, the unspoken questions lingering in the air. "We should get going, Oliver," Henry said, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. As they turned to leave, Oliver glanced back at Sam, a small frown on his face. "Bye, Sam." "Thanks again," he called out, his voice filled with sincerity. Sam smiled and gave a small wave. "Take care, kid," he said, watching as they walked away. The familiar sense of loneliness began to settle back in as the car pulled away. But today, it felt a little different. Today, he had made a difference, even if just for a moment. And that was enough. "I'm Oliver," the boy finally said, his voice still shaky. "Sam," he responded with a nod. "Where are your parents, Oliver? You shouldn't be out here alone." "My dad's coming to pick me up," Oliver replied, glancing nervously around the park as if expecting the Bullies to return. Sam noticed the boy's clean, expensive clothes and the high-end backpack. Oliver was clearly from a different world, a world full of comfort and security, something that Sam had lost a long time ago. But in this moment, none of that mattered. "How about I wait here with you until he arrives?" Sam offered. Oliver's eyes lit up and he nodded eagerly. They walked over to a nearby bench, where they sat together. The adrenaline that had surged through Sam during the confrontation began to fade, leaving him feeling the ache of fatigue. But as he glanced at Oliver, who seemed to relax a little more with each passing minute, Sam felt a sense of purpose that he hadn't experienced in a long time. The minutes ticked by in a comfortable silence. Oliver stayed close to Sam, clearly comforted by his presence. It was almost as if, by being there, Sam provided a protective shield that made Oliver feel safe. Sam understood that feeling. He knew how much just having someone nearby could make all the difference when you felt vulnerable. Eventually, a sleek black car pulled up along the park's edge, and Oliver's face brightened. "That's my dad," he exclaimed, jumping up from the bench and waving excitedly. Sam stood up slowly, watching as the car door opened, and a man in a sharp suit stepped out. The man had a stern look about him. His features were sharp, his posture rigid. But the moment his eyes landed on Oliver, the sternness softened, replaced by palpable relief. "Oliver, are you okay?" the man asked, hurrying over and kneeling down to embrace his son. His voice was filled with a mixture of worry and tenderness. "I'm okay, Dad," Oliver reassured him, pulling back just enough to point at Sam, who stood a few steps away. "This is Sam. He helped me when those kids were picking on me." The man, whose name was Henry Carter, turned his gaze toward Sam. There was a moment of silence as he took in Sam's worn clothes and tired expression. His eyes narrowed slightly, not in hostility, but in a guarded sort of curiosity. "Thank you for helping my son," Henry said. His words were polite, though his tone held a certain distance, a formality that suggested he wasn't quite sure what to make of Sam. Just glad he's all right, Sam replied, his eyes meeting Henry's briefly before dropping to the ground. He could feel the weight of Henry's scrutiny, the unspoken questions hanging in the air between them. It was a look Sam had grown used to, one that assessed, that judged, that tried to place him in a box that made sense. "We need to get going, Oliver," Henry said, placing a protective hand on his son's shoulder. He straightened up, his attention shifting fully back to his child. As they turned to leave, Oliver glanced back at Sam, a small frown tugging at his lips. "Bye, Sam. Thanks again," he called, his voice full of sincerity that only a child could muster. Sam forced a smile, lifting his hand in a wave. "Take care, kid," he said, his voice softer now. He watched as Henry guided Oliver back to the car, the two of them getting inside before driving away. The sleek vehicle moved smoothly down the road, disappearing from sight, leaving Sam standing alone by the bench. As the car pulled away, Sam felt the familiar weight of loneliness begin to settle back in, that gnawing emptiness that came from knowing he was once again alone. But today, it felt a little different. There was something lighter, something that felt almost like hope. Today, he had made a difference. Even if it was just for a brief moment, he had mattered to someone. And for Sam, that was enough. He turned back towards the bench and slowly sat down, leaning back and closing his eyes. The park had returned to its usual calm, the laughter of children in the distance blending with the rustle of leaves overhead. Sam let out a long breath, feeling the tension slowly leave his body. For a long time, he had felt like he was drifting, without direction or purpose. His days had blended into one another, a series of aimless moments spent just trying to get by. But today, something had changed. He had seen fear in Oliver's eyes, and he had done something about it. He had stepped up, despite everything, and helped. It wasn't much, but it was something. And as he sat there, listening to the sounds of life moving around him, Sam felt a glimmer of something he hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of purpose. Maybe he couldn't change everything that had gone wrong in his own life. Maybe he couldn't erase the mistakes or the losses that had brought him to this point. But maybe, just maybe, he could still do some good. The minutes turned into an hour, and Sam remained on the bench, his eyes closed, his mind drifting. He wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, or if he would ever see Oliver again. But for the first time in a long time, he felt like there was a reason to keep going, a reason beyond just surviving another day. Eventually, Sam opened his eyes, the sunlight filtering through the branches above. He stood up, stretching his tired muscles, and began to make his way out of the park. As he walked, he glanced back at the playground one last time, a faint smile playing on his lips. Oliver had called him a hero, and maybe, in that one small moment, he had been. And maybe that was enough to start making a change. Not just for others, but for himself as well. With that thought in mind, Sam walked on, his steps a little lighter, his heart a little less burdened. Today he had made a difference. And maybe, just maybe, tomorrow he could do it again. The day after their encounter, Sam did not expect to see Oliver again. But to his surprise, as he sat beneath the oak tree, he noticed a small figure approaching. It was Oliver, holding his backpack tightly, looking a little hesitant. "Hey, Sam," Oliver greeted as he got closer. "Can I sit with you? Shouldn't you be with your dad?" Sam asked, surprised to see him. He had to take a call. "He's coming back," Oliver explained, glancing toward the park entrance. Sam made space for the boy on the bench. "Sure, take a seat," Sam said with a nod. Oliver climbed onto the bench, letting his legs dangle. They sat in silence for a while, the rustle of leaves and distant sounds of laughter filling the gaps. Sam felt the tension in his body slowly ease, as if the company of the young boy brought with it a sense of calm. Finally, Oliver broke the quiet. "Why did you help me yesterday?" he asked, looking up at Sam. Sam took a deep breath, unsure how to answer. "Because you needed help," he said simply. No one deserves to be treated like that. But you didn't even know me, Oliver said, his brows furrowing. Sam chuckled lightly. You don't need to know someone to do the right thing, he said. Sometimes, being there is enough. Oliver seemed to consider this, his eyes thoughtful. He paused for a moment, then asked, Do you live here in the park? His small face tilted slightly, as if trying to figure Sam out. Sam nodded vaguely, looking off into the distance. Sort of. I'm around here a lot, he replied. He didn't want to lie, but he also didn't want to burden Oliver with the truth of his homelessness. Oliver looked thoughtful. He seemed to want to ask more, but instead, he stayed silent for a while longer. Sam could tell that Oliver was trying to understand him, trying to make sense of the man who had stepped in to save him without asking for anything in return. After a few more moments of quiet, Oliver spoke again. My dad's always busy, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. He's a lawyer, and he works a lot. I don't get to see him much. Sam glanced at Oliver, noticing the sadness in his eyes. It wasn't the kind of sadness that came from being bullied or being scared. It was deeper, more profound, a loneliness that Sam recognized all too well. He cares about you, though, Sam said, his voice gentle. You can tell by the way he came rushing over yesterday. Oliver nodded, but the sadness didn't completely leave his face. I know, he said quietly. I just wish he wasn't so busy all the time. Sam didn't know what to say to that. He knew better than anyone that life didn't always give people what they wanted, no matter how much they wished for it. Instead, he reached over and patted Oliver on the shoulder. You're a strong kid, Sam said, giving him an encouraging smile. Sometimes, things don't go the way we want, but that doesn't mean they won't get better. Oliver looked up at Sam, his eyes searching. For a moment, it seemed like he was about to say something more, but before he could, a voice called out from the park entrance. Oliver. Both Sam and Oliver turned to see Henry walking toward them, his phone still in his hand. His expression softened as he saw his son sitting on the bench next to Sam. Hey, Dad, Oliver called. Standing up, Henry approached, his eyes flicking from Oliver to Sam. A mixture of curiosity and something else in his gaze. Something like gratitude. Sorry about that, buddy, Henry said, placing a hand on Oliver's shoulder. He then looked at Sam, his expression less guarded than it had been the day before. Thank you for keeping him company. No problem, Sam said, standing up as well. He's a good kid. Henry nodded, and for a moment, it looked like he wanted to say more. Instead, he looked down at Oliver. We should get going. Say goodbye, Oliver. Oliver turned back to Sam, a small smile on his face. Will I see you again? He asked, his voice hopeful. Sam hesitated, glancing at Henry before looking back at Oliver. Maybe, he said, giving the boy a smile. You take care of yourself, okay? Oliver nodded, his smile widening. You too, Sam. As Henry led Oliver away, Sam watched them go, a strange warmth settling in his chest. He could hear Oliver talking to his dad, his voice animated as he recounted their conversation. It made Sam smile, a real, genuine smile that he hadn't felt in a long time. As the sleek car drove off, Sam found himself still standing by the bench, his heart feeling lighter than it had in years. He had no idea if he'd ever see Oliver again, but he knew that the boy had made an impact on him, had reminded him of something he thought he'd lost, the ability to make a difference, even in small ways. He turned and began walking away from the bench, his steps slow and thoughtful. He wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring. He still had no home, no real direction. But today had given him something that felt a lot like hope. Maybe it was enough to take it one day at a time. Maybe, just maybe, there was still a place for him in this world. A place where he could matter, even if only to a boy named Oliver. With that thought, Sam walked on, the late afternoon sun warming his face. He didn't have all the answers, and his life was still filled with uncertainties. But for the first time in a long time, he felt like there was a reason to keep moving forward, and that he realized was more than enough. After a pause, Oliver spoke again, his voice softer this time. Do you get lonely, Sam? The question caught Sam off guard. Loneliness was something he had grown used to, something he accepted. Sometimes, he answered honestly, but I guess it's something you learn to live with. I get lonely too, Oliver said, his voice barely audible. Sam looked at the boy, surprised by his admission. Despite his father's apparent care and his privileged life, Oliver carried a loneliness that Sam could recognize. Why do you feel lonely? Sam asked gently. My dad's always working. He's a lawyer, and he's really busy, Oliver explained, staring at his feet. I don't get to see him much. Sam nodded. He understood the pain of longing for someone's presence, wanting someone's time and attention, but knowing they were out of reach. He didn't have any words that could change the situation, so he reached over and gave Oliver's shoulder a gentle squeeze. Your dad cares about you a lot, Sam said. You can tell by how quickly he showed up when you were in trouble. Oliver smiled faintly. Yeah, I know. I just wish he wasn't so busy all the time. Sam didn't have a magic answer to make things better. He could only offer his presence, his willingness to listen, and sometimes he knew that was all anyone really needed. The two of them sat quietly for a while longer, the park around them coming alive with the sounds of people enjoying the afternoon. The wind rustled through the leaves above them, and Sam could feel Oliver gradually relaxing, his shoulders losing some of their tension. There was something peaceful about the moment, something that made Sam feel like maybe, just maybe, he was doing some good. What do you do all day? Oliver asked, breaking the silence once more. He looked up at Sam, genuine curiosity in his young eyes. I mean, if you're always here, do you get bored? Sam chuckled. Sometimes, he admitted, but I find ways to keep busy. I read, I watch people, I think. He paused, a smile tugging at his lips. You'd be surprised how interesting people can be if you just sit back and watch. Oliver seemed intrigued by this. Like what? Sam looked out at the park, scanning the people walking by. Like that couple over there, he said, nodding towards two people sitting on a blanket, sharing a picnic. You can tell they're happy just by the way they look at each other. Or that jogger, he added, pointing to a man running by with his dog. He runs here every day, always with his dog. You start to notice patterns, and it's like you get to know people without ever talking to them. Oliver smiled. I never thought about it like that. He swung his legs, letting them dangle off the edge of the bench. Maybe I'll try it sometime. Sam nodded. It's a good way to pass the time. Makes you realize that everyone's got their own story. He looked down at Oliver. Even you. Oliver grinned, but his smile faded slightly as he glanced towards the park entrance. Sometimes I wish my dad had more time for me, he admitted. I know he loves me, but it feels like he's always got something more important to do. Sam nodded, his heart aching for the young boy. He wanted to say something to make it better, to reassure Oliver that things would change, but he knew that wasn't a promise he could make. Instead, he chose to focus on what he could offer in the moment. You know, Sam began, his voice gentle, your dad works hard because he wants to give you the best life he can. It's not always easy, but that doesn't mean he doesn't care. Sometimes, people show love in different ways. Oliver looked up at Sam, his eyes searching. Like you, he said quietly. You helped me even though you didn't have to. That's a different way of caring, right? Sam felt a lump form in his throat, and he swallowed hard before answering. Yeah, kid, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I guess it is. They sat together in silence for a few more minutes, the weight of their conversation hanging in the air. Sam couldn't help but feel a deep sense of connection to Oliver. The boy was from a world so different from his own, a world of privilege and security. Yet they shared something fundamental. They both knew what it was like to feel alone, to want something more from the people they loved. After a while, Sam noticed Henry approaching from across the park. He was no longer on the phone, his eyes searching until they landed on Oliver and Sam sitting together on the bench. Oliver, Henry called out, his voice carrying across the park. Oliver jumped up from the bench, waving his hand. "Over here, Dad," he called back, a smile lighting up his face. Henry walked over, his expression softening as he approached. He looked from Oliver to Sam, his eyes filled with something that looked almost like gratitude. "Thanks again for keeping an eye on him," Henry said, his tone still formal but less distant than it had been before. Sam stood up, nodding. "No problem. He's a great kid." Henry placed a hand on Oliver's shoulder, giving it a gentle squeeze. "We should get going," he said, though there was a note of reluctance in his voice. He looked down at his son. "Say goodbye, Oliver." Oliver turned to Sam, a hopeful look in his eyes. "Will I see you again, Sam?" he asked, his voice earnest. Sam hesitated for a moment, glancing at Henry before looking back at Oliver. "Maybe," he said, giving the boy a smile. "Take care of yourself, okay?" Oliver nodded, a smile spreading across his face. "You too, Sam." As Henry led Oliver away, Sam watched them go, a warmth settling in his chest. He could hear Oliver chattering excitedly to his dad, recounting their conversation. It made Sam smile, a real, genuine smile that he hadn't felt in a long time. As the sleek black car pulled away from the park, Sam found himself still standing by the bench, his heart feeling lighter than it had in years. He had no idea if he'd ever see Oliver again, but he knew that the boy had made an impact on him, had reminded him of something he thought he'd lost. The ability to connect, to care, to make a difference, even in small ways. He turned and began to walk away from the bench, his steps slow and thoughtful. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. He still had no home, no real direction. But today had given him something he hadn't had in a long time. Hope. Maybe it was enough to take it one day at a time. Maybe, just maybe, there was still a place for him in this world. A place where he could matter, even if only to a boy named Oliver. With that thought, Sam walked on, the sun beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. He didn't have all the answers, and his life was still filled with uncertainties. But for the first time in a long time, he felt like there was a reason to keep moving forward, and that he realized was more than enough. Later that day, Henry drove in silence, glancing at Oliver through the rearview mirror. His son was unusually quiet, his small face pressed against the window. After a while, Oliver spoke up. "Dad, why did we have to leave so fast?" Henry took a breath, choosing his words carefully. "I just wanted to make sure you were safe," he replied. "Sometimes we don't know much about strangers, and I want to protect you." "But Sam was nice," Oliver protested. "He helped me. He didn't ask for anything." "I know," Henry said, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. "But as a father, I have to be careful. I just wish you'd talk to him more," Oliver mumbled. The word stung Henry, who was used to protecting his son from what he couldn't control. But Oliver's innocent perspective gave him pause. He realized that his caution, while well-intentioned, had also prevented him from seeing the good that Sam had done. "Maybe I should have," Henry admitted after a moment, his voice softer. He glanced at Oliver through the mirror, seeing the hopeful look in his son's eyes. "Tell you what, if we see Sam again, I'll try to talk to him, okay?" Oliver's face brightened slightly, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Really?" Henry nodded. "Really?" The conversation ended there, but the words lingered in Henry's mind. He had always prided himself on being a good father, protective, careful, and diligent. But maybe, just maybe, there were times when his overprotectiveness stopped him from truly understanding what his son needed. A few days later, Henry found himself with an unexpected free afternoon. He had wrapped up a meeting early, and instead of diving into more work, he decided to take Oliver to the park. He knew his son had been hoping to see Sam again, and Henry had to admit that he was curious about the man who had made such an impact on his child. As they walked through the park, Oliver held on to his father's hand, his eyes scanning the benches and pathways. Henry could feel his son's anticipation, the hope that they might find Sam sitting under the oak tree again. "Do you think he'll be here?" Oliver asked, looking up at his father. Henry smiled gently. "I don't know, buddy, but we'll look." They walked towards the same bench where Sam and Oliver had sat the last time. To Oliver's delight, there he was, Sam, sitting beneath the oak tree, his eyes closed as if he was resting. Oliver let go of his father's hand and ran ahead, his voice ringing out, "Sam!" Sam opened his eyes, blinking in surprise as he saw Oliver running towards him. A smile broke across his face as he stood up. "Hey there, kid," he greeted warmly, kneeling down to meet Oliver at eye level. "Didn't think I'd see you again so soon." Henry approached more slowly, watching the exchange. There was a warmth between Sam and Oliver that was undeniable. It was something genuine, something that Henry knew couldn't be forced or faked. "Hi, Sam," Henry said as he reached them. His tone was more relaxed this time, and he extended his hand. "I want to thank you properly for what you did for Oliver the other day. I'm Henry." Sam straightened up, taking Henry's hand and shaking it firmly. "Nice to meet you, Henry," he said, a bit of surprise in his voice. It was no trouble. "Oliver is a good kid." Henry nodded, glancing at his son, who was beaming up at Sam. "He's been wanting to come back and see you. I realized I might have been too quick to judge. I appreciate what you did." Sam gave a small nod. "I understand. You're just looking out for your kid." There was no bitterness in his voice, just understanding. Sam knew all too well how the world could be, and he didn't hold Henry's caution against him. "Would you like to join us for a while?" Henry asked, surprising even himself with the offer. "We were just going to walk around the park. Maybe get some ice cream." Oliver's eyes lit up at the suggestion, and he looked at Sam eagerly. "Please, Sam, come with us." Sam hesitated for a moment, glancing between Henry and Oliver. He wasn't used to being included, and part of him felt out of place. But the hopeful look on Oliver's face made his decision for him. "Sure," Sam said, a smile forming. "I'd like that." They walked together through the park, Oliver skipping ahead at times, his excitement palpable. Henry and Sam fell into step beside each other, an easy silence settling between them. The awkwardness that had initially hung in the air seemed to dissipate as they walked. "So, Sam," Henry began after a while, "Oliver tells me you're here a lot. Do you live nearby?" Sam hesitated, then decided on honesty. "Not really. I've been on my own for a while now. The park, it's kind of my place to be, you know?" Henry glanced at Sam, seeing the weariness in his eyes, the tiredness that came from more than just physical exhaustion. It was the look of someone who had faced more than his share of hardships. "I'm sorry to hear that," Henry said sincerely. "I can't imagine how difficult that must be." Sam shrugged, a faint smile on his lips. "You get used to it, but it's not all bad. Moments like these make it worth it." Henry nodded thoughtfully. He could see why Oliver had taken such a liking to Sam. There was a kindness in him, a resilience that Henry found himself admiring. When they reached the ice cream stand, Henry insisted on buying for all of them. They sat down on a nearby bench, Oliver happily licking his cone while Henry and Sam ate theirs more slowly. "You know," Henry said after a while, "if you ever need anything, a meal, a place to rest, you can always come to us. I know it's not much, but it's an offer." Sam looked at Henry, surprised by the generosity. He saw the sincerity in the man's eyes, and for a moment, he was at a loss for words. "Thank you," he finally said, his voice quiet. "That means more than you know." Henry nodded. "Everyone needs a little help sometimes," he said, his gaze drifting to Oliver, who was now busy trying to keep his ice cream from dripping onto his shoes. "And I can see how much you mean to Oliver. That means a lot to me." They finished their ice cream, the conversation flowing easily between them. Oliver told Sam about his school and his friends, and Sam listened intently, genuinely interested. Henry watched the two of them, a sense of warmth spreading through him. He had been wrong to judge Sam so quickly, and he was glad to have been given the chance to make it right. As the sun began to set, they made their way back to the car. Oliver gave Sam a big hug before getting in, his face lighting up as he said, "See you soon, Sam." Sam waved, a genuine smile on his face. "See you soon, kid." As Henry drove away, he glanced at Sam through the rear-view mirror, watching as the man grew smaller in the distance. Henry felt a sense of peace he hadn't expected. Sometimes, building bridges meant letting go of fear and opening up to the possibility of connection. And as they drove home, Oliver chattered happily about their afternoon. Henry couldn't help but feel that they had all taken a step in the right direction, toward understanding, toward kindness, and perhaps toward something like friendship. The following weekend, Henry decided to return to the park with Oliver. It had been on his mind all week. The way Sam had protected his son, and the connection Oliver seemed to feel with him. "Are we going to see Sam?" Oliver asked, excitement in his voice. "Maybe," Henry said as they walked through the park. As they approached the area where they had met before, they saw Sam sitting on a bench, his gaze distant until Oliver shouted out his name. "Sam!" Oliver ran toward him, his face beaming. Sam looked up, surprised but pleased. "Hey, kid," he greeted. Henry walked up more slowly, nodding at Sam. "We thought we'd come by the park," Henry said. "Glad you did," Sam replied. There was a brief silence before Oliver spoke up, pulling at Sam's sleeve. "Can you play catch with us?" Sam looked to Henry, who gave a slight nod. "Sure," Sam said, smiling. They played together for a while, the awkwardness between Henry and Sam gradually fading as they enjoyed a simple game. Oliver's laughter filled the air, and soon the two men found themselves laughing along with him. There was something about the carefree nature of the game that seemed to dissolve the barriers between them. After a while, they took a break, settling down on the grass. Oliver lay back, staring up at the sky, while Henry and Sam sat beside each other, their breathing heavy from running around. "Thanks for doing this," Henry said, glancing at Sam. "It means a lot to Oliver." Sam shrugged, a small smile on his lips. "I like spending time with him. He's a good kid. Reminds me of myself when I was younger, before things got complicated." Henry nodded, sensing the weight behind Sam's words. "Life has a way of doing that, doesn't it? Making things complicated." Sam chuckled, though there was little humor in it. "Yeah, it sure does." He looked over at Oliver, who was now pointing out shapes in the clouds, his voice filled with wonder. "But moments like this, they make it a little easier." Henry followed Sam's gaze, his heart swelling with a mix of emotions. He had spent so much time trying to shield Oliver from the world, from people he deemed unpredictable or unsafe. But seeing his son so happy, so carefree, made him realize that perhaps his protection had also kept Oliver from experiencing genuine connections. "You know," Henry began, his voice quieter, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said the other day, about how everyone has their own story. I think I've spent so much time trying to write Oliver's story for him that I forgot to let him find his own way." Sam looked at Henry, a hint of surprise in his eyes. "You're just trying to do what's best for him. Can't fault you for that." Henry sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Maybe, but I also want him to grow up knowing that people deserve a chance. That not everyone is out to hurt you." He paused, glancing at Sam. "I'm glad he met you. You've shown him kindness, and that means a lot to me." Sam was quiet for a moment, his gaze shifting back to Oliver. "He's a special kid. It's easy to be kind to him." He hesitated before adding, "You're doing a good job, Henry. He knows you love him." The two men sat in silence for a while, the only sounds being the distant chatter of other park-goers and Oliver's occasional exclamations about the clouds. It was a comfortable silence, one that didn't need to be filled with words. After a while, Oliver sat up, his eyes bright. "Dad, Sam, you have to see this one. It looks just like a dragon." Henry and Sam both leaned back, looking up at the sky. Henry smiled, nodding. "You're right, buddy. It does look like a dragon." Sam squinted, a grin spreading across his face. "I see it. And look, there's the tail right there." Oliver beamed, clearly pleased that they saw what he saw. He flopped back down on the grass, his laughter ringing out. Henry exchanged a glance with Sam, both of them smiling at Oliver's joy. As the afternoon wore on, Henry found himself relaxing more and more. He and Sam talked about everything and nothing, their favorite books, stories from their childhoods, even little things like what foods they liked. It felt natural, easy, like they had known each other longer than just a few brief meetings. Eventually, the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the park. Oliver sat up, rubbing his eyes. "Do we have to go, Dad?" he asked, his voice tinged with tiredness. Henry smiled, reaching over to ruffle his son's hair. "It's getting late, buddy. We'll come back soon." Oliver turned to Sam, his eyes hopeful. "Will you be here next time, Sam?" Sam hesitated, glancing at Henry before looking back at Oliver. "I'll try, kid. I can't promise, but I'll try." Oliver nodded, seeming satisfied with that answer. He stood up, brushing the grass off his clothes, and walked over to Sam, wrapping his arms around him in a hug. "Thanks for today, Sam. It was really fun." Sam patted Oliver's back, a soft smile on his face. "Anytime, kid. You take care of yourself, all right?" Henry watched the exchange, feeling a warmth spread through him. He stepped forward, extending his hand to Sam once more. "Thank you, Sam, for everything." Sam shook Henry's hand, nodding. "No need to thank me. I'm just glad I could help." As Henry and Oliver walked away, Oliver kept glancing back, waving at Sam until they were out of sight. Henry looked down at his son, seeing the happiness on his face, and he knew he had made the right choice in bringing him back to the park. "You really like Sam, don't you?" Henry asked as they reached their car. Oliver nodded vigorously. "He's really nice, Dad. And he listens." "Like, really listens?" Henry smiled, unlocking the car. "I'm glad. It's important to have people like that in your life." As they drove home, the sun setting behind them, Henry couldn't help but feel a sense of fulfillment. He had taken a step towards something different, something better, not just for Oliver, but for himself as well. He had let down his guard, allowed someone into their lives, and it had made all the difference. Sometimes he realized building bridges wasn't about grand gestures. It was about the small moments, the simple acts of kindness, the willingness to trust, and the courage to open up. And as Henry listened to Oliver chatter happily in the backseat, he knew that they were on the right path. Sam had become a part of their story, and for that, Henry was grateful. Whatever happened next, he was ready to face it, one day at a time, with his son by his side, and perhaps a new friend to share the journey with. As the sun began to set, Henry and Sam sat on a bench, watching Oliver chase after a ball. The golden light bathed the park in a warm glow, and the laughter of children filled the air. It was a peaceful moment, one that made Henry realize just how far they had come. Henry turned to Sam, his voice sincere. "Thank you for what you did for my son. I'm sorry if I seemed ungrateful." Sam shook his head, a gentle smile on his lips. "No need to apologize," he replied. "I understand. You were just trying to protect him. It's what any good parent would do." Henry looked down, his gaze fixed on the ground for a moment. He thought about how quickly he had judged Sam, how his own fears had nearly kept Oliver from forming a genuine connection. "You're a good man, Sam," he said, meeting Sam's eyes. "If there's anything I can do to help, just let me know." Sam was taken aback by Henry's words. For so long, he had been on his own, fighting to survive without expecting kindness from anyone. The offer touched him more than he could say. He nodded slowly. "Thanks. I appreciate that." They fell into silence again, watching as Oliver kicked the ball, his laughter echoing across the park. The atmosphere between Henry and Sam felt lighter, the tension that had once existed between them now replaced with a sense of camaraderie. In that moment, they were no longer just a businessman and a homeless man. They were simply two people who cared about a young boy and wanted the best for him. After a while, Oliver ran back over, his face flushed with excitement. "Did you see that kick, Dad?" he asked, his eyes bright. Henry grinned. "I sure did, buddy. You're getting better every day." Oliver turned to Sam, his smile widening. "Next time, you have to kick it back." Sam chuckled, nodding. You got it, kid. Next time, I'll be ready. Henry watched the interaction, feeling a warmth spread through him. He had spent so much time trying to shield Oliver from the harsh realities of the world, but he realized now that there was value in letting his son see both sides of life. The good and the bad, the struggles and the triumphs. Sam had shown Oliver a different perspective, one that was important for him to understand. As they began to gather their things, Henry turned to Sam once more. You know, Sam, I meant what I said. If you need anything, a place to stay, a meal, anything at all, don't hesitate to reach out. You're part of our lives now, and I want you to know that. Sam's eyes softened, and he looked away for a moment, as if trying to collect himself. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. That means a lot, Henry. More than you know. I've been on my own for a long time, and it's not often that people offer a hand. I'm grateful. Henry nodded, his expression earnest. We all need help sometimes. No one should have to go through life alone. As they walked back to the car, Oliver holding Sam's hand on one side and Henry's on the other, Henry felt a sense of fulfillment he hadn't experienced in a long time. This moment, walking side by side with the promise of a new beginning, was something he would cherish. It wasn't just about helping Sam. It was about the lessons they were all learning together. When they reached the car, Oliver gave Sam another big hug. See you soon, Sam, he said, his voice full of hope. Sam hugged him back, his smile genuine. See you soon, kid. As Henry and Oliver drove away, Henry glanced at Sam through the rearview mirror, watching as he waved until they turned the corner. Oliver was already talking excitedly about their next visit, his voice filled with joy. Dad, do you think Sam can come over for dinner one day? Oliver asked, his eyes wide with hope. Henry smiled, his heart swelling. I think that can be arranged, buddy. I think Sam would like that. Oliver beamed, his happiness infectious. I can't wait. As they continued their drive home, Henry reflected on everything that had happened. He realized that the greatest lessons weren't taught in classrooms or learned from books. They were found in moments like these, in the connections we form with others, in the kindness we offer without expecting anything in return. Sam had reminded him of the importance of compassion, of looking beyond appearances and giving people a chance. And as Oliver chatted on about all the things they could do with Sam next time, Henry felt a sense of peace. He knew that their journey was far from over, but they were on the right path. They had built a bridge, one that connected their lives in a meaningful way. It was a bridge that had taken courage to build, but it was worth every step. Henry looked at his son, his heart full. Sometimes, buddy, life gives us unexpected friends, and those friends can make all the difference. Oliver nodded, his eyes shining. Like Sam, right, Dad? Henry smiled, nodding. Exactly like Sam. As they pulled into their driveway, Henry knew that this was just the beginning. They had faced fears, opened up to new possibilities, and embraced the unexpected. And in doing so, they had found not just a friend, but a lesson in the power of kindness and the beauty of human connection. And that's the story of Sam and Oliver. It shows us that acts of kindness, no matter how small, can bridge gaps between different worlds and bring us together. It reminds us that we all have the power to make a difference, even in the most unexpected moments. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, leave your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to Life Story 999 for more inspiring tales. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay kind and keep believing in the power of humanity.